The Trojan Horse is one of the most famous stories ever told. The strange part? Almost everything people think they know about it is more complicated than they realize. A giant wooden horse. A city that celebrates too early. Soldiers hiding inside. And one terrible mistake that ends a war that lasted 10 long years. It's a story so famous that today we even use the words Trojan Horse to describe a hidden threat. Computers get infected by Trojan viruses. Companies worry about Trojan attacks. The phrase has survived for over 3,000 years. But here's the question. Did the horse really exist? Or was it something completely different? To answer that, we have to go back to one of the greatest wars ever told. A war that may have started because of love, but ended because of pride. The story begins with a wedding. Not just any wedding, but the marriage between Peleus and the sea goddess Thetis. Every god was invited. Except one. Eris, the goddess of conflict. As revenge, she threw a golden apple into the crowd with 4 simple words. To the fairest. 3 goddesses wanted it. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Instead of choosing for themselves, they asked a young prince from Troy named Paris to decide. Each goddess offered him a reward. Hera promised power. Athena promised wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite made one promise that changed history. She would give Paris the most beautiful woman in the world. Her name was Helen. There was only one problem. Helen was already married. She was the wife of Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Paris traveled to Sparta as a guest. Instead of leaving alone, he returned to Troy with Helen. Whether she was kidnapped, convinced, or willingly left depends on which ancient writer you read. But the result was the same. The Greek kings united. More than 1,000 ships crossed the Aegean Sea. And the city of Troy was surrounded. Troy wasn't just another city. It sat on high ground near the entrance to the Dardanelles, one of the most important trade routes in the ancient world. Anyone controlling Troy could influence ships moving between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea. That made the city rich. Very rich. It also made it heavily defended. Massive stone walls surrounded the city. Some sections were over 5 meters thick. Ancient writers claimed they were so strong they seemed impossible to break. The Greeks attacked again and again. They fought famous battles. Heroes became legends. Achilles, Hector, Ajax, Odysseus. But despite all their victories in the open field, the walls of Troy never fell. 1 year became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 10. Imagine spending an entire decade far from home. Food running low. Friends dying. Families waiting. Both sides were exhausted. Something had to change. The Greeks had one advantage. Achilles. He was their greatest fighter. His name alone could frighten entire armies. But even legends don't live forever. During the final years of the war, Achilles was struck by an arrow. Later stories say it hit his heel, the only weak spot on his body. That's where the phrase, Achilles' heel, comes from today. Whether that part is true or not, Achilles died. For Troy, it was a huge victory. For the Greeks, it was a disaster. They had lost their strongest weapon. Brute force wasn't enough anymore. If they wanted to win, they needed something stronger than muscles. They needed an idea. That idea came from Odysseus. Unlike Achilles, Odysseus wasn't famous because he was the strongest. He was famous because he was the smartest. He understood something that many leaders forget. When strength stops working, think differently. His plan sounded completely insane. Build an enormous wooden horse. Hide soldiers inside. Pretend to sail away. Leave the horse behind as a gift. It sounded ridiculous. Which is exactly why it had a chance. The Greeks burned their camp to make it look abandoned. Their ships disappeared beyond the horizon, hiding behind a nearby island instead of sailing home. Only one man stayed behind. Sinon. His job was to lie. And he lied brilliantly. When the Trojans captured him, he claimed the Greeks had given up. The horse, he said, was an offering to the goddess Athena. If Troy destroyed it, they would anger the gods. If they brought it inside the city, they would receive divine protection. It was the perfect story. It mixed hope, fear, and religion. Three things that can make people ignore common sense. Not everyone believed Sinon. A Trojan priest named Laocoon didn't trust the story for a second. He gave one of history's greatest warnings. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Then he threw a spear into the side of the wooden horse. Ancient stories say the spear struck the wood. And from inside, the hidden soldiers almost made a sound. The plan nearly failed. Then something strange happened. According to the legend, two giant sea serpents appeared from the ocean and killed Laocoon and his sons. The Trojans believed the gods had punished him for attacking the sacred gift. Today, many historians think this part was added later to explain why the Trojans ignored such obvious danger. Whatever the truth, Laocoon's warning died with him. And the horse rolled through the gates. That night, Troy celebrated. After 10 years of war, the enemy was finally gone. People drank. They laughed. They slept. The city had never felt safer. That was exactly what Odysseus wanted. After midnight, the hidden soldiers climbed out of the horse. They quietly killed the guards. Then they opened the city gates. Outside, the Greek fleet had returned under the cover of darkness. Thousands of soldiers rushed into Troy. The battle was over almost before it began. Houses burned. Temples were destroyed. People ran through streets filled with smoke. King Priam was killed. The royal family was torn apart. The great city that had survived 10 years of siege fell in a single night. Not because its walls were weak, but because its people believed the war was over. Here's where history becomes fascinating. No ancient Greek writer who lived during the Trojan War actually described the wooden horse. In fact, the oldest complete version comes centuries later in epic poems like the Odyssey and, even later, in the Roman poet Virgil's Aeneid. That leaves historians with a big question. Was there ever a giant wooden horse? Or is it a symbol? Some researchers think the horse could have been a siege machine used to break walls. Others think it may have been a ship. Ancient ships were sometimes linked to horses because of carved horse head decorations on their fronts. Another theory is that the horse represents an earthquake. Why? Because the god Poseidon ruled both horses and earthquakes. If an earthquake damaged Troy's walls, later storytellers may have turned that event into the legend of a horse. Then there's archaeology. In the 1870s, a businessman named Heinrich Schliemann began digging at a hill in modern-day Turkey called Hazarlik. He believed it was ancient Troy. He was right about one thing. The site contains the remains of several cities built on top of each other over thousands of years. One layer shows signs of destruction around the Late Bronze Age, roughly the period many historians connect with a possible Trojan War. But archaeology cannot prove a wooden horse ever stood outside those walls. The evidence suggests that a real city existed. A real conflict may have happened. But the famous horse remains a mystery. Whether the horse was real almost doesn't matter anymore. The story survived because it teaches something people keep forgetting. The biggest dangers don't always come through the front gate. Sometimes they arrive looking like gifts. Throughout history, armies have used deception to win impossible battles. Businesses have fallen because they trusted the wrong partner. Computer hackers still use the name Trojan because malicious software hides inside something that appears safe. The lesson is timeless. Victory doesn't always belong to the strongest. Sometimes it belongs to the person who understands how people think. The walls of Troy were built to stop armies. They were never built to stop trust. The Trojan Horse is more than an old myth. It's a story balanced between history and legend, where real places, real wars, and unforgettable characters mixed with tales that grew bigger with every generation. Maybe a giant wooden horse stood outside Troy. Maybe it never existed at all. But one thing is certain. For more than 3,000 years, this single story has reminded us that the greatest victories, and the greatest disasters, often begin with one simple decision. Watch the next video to uncover another true story that's even stranger than the myths.